Katie Morgan pressed her face against the cold metal window of Research Station Horizon 7, watching distant stars twinkle in the endless black of space. At 19, she was the youngest person ever to work on a deep space research station, but her love for alien life forms had earned her a spot on Dr. Lisa Carter's team. Katie dreamed of the day humans would meet other intelligent species among the stars. "Still daydreaming about little green men?" Jake Sullivan asked as he walked up behind her. The station's security chief was only 10 years older than Katie, but his military background made him seem much more mature. He had become like a big brother to her during her 6 months on the station. Katie laughed and turned around. "Not little green men. Maybe tall blue ones or short purple ones with tentacles. The universe is so big, Jake. There has to be someone else out there." "Well, be careful what you wish for," Jake said with a smile. "Sometimes what we find isn't what we expect." Katie rolled her eyes. Jake always worried too much. The research station was far from any known dangers, floating peacefully in space near the edge of human territory. They were just studying strange energy readings that Dr. Carter thought might be natural phenomena. Nothing exciting ever happened on Horizon 7. That changed 3 hours later. Katie was in the lab looking at samples under a microscope when the station's alarms began screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the corridors as the emergency system activated. She had never heard these alarms before, not even during drills. "All personnel to emergency stations," came Dr. Carter's voice over the communication system. Her usually calm voice sounded stressed. "This is not a drill. Unknown vessel approaching at high speed." Katie's heart raced with excitement and fear. An unknown vessel could only mean one thing: first contact with an alien species. She ran toward the main control room, her mind filled with possibilities. Maybe her dreams were finally coming true. The control room was chaos when she arrived. Dr. Carter stood at the main console, her fingers flying over the controls. Captain Roy Mitchell, who commanded the small defense ship Aurora's Edge, was arguing with someone on his communication device. Jake Sullivan was checking weapon systems that Katie didn't even know the station had. "What's happening?" Katie asked breathlessly. Dr. Carter looked up, her face pale. "We detected a ship about an hour ago. It's unlike anything in our databases. The design is completely alien and it's heading straight for us." Katie felt a thrill of excitement despite the obvious danger. "Are we trying to communicate with them?" "We've been sending standard first contact messages in multiple languages and mathematical sequences," Captain Mitchell said, looking frustrated. "No response. They're not even slowing down." On the main screen, Katie could see a dark shape growing larger against the stars. As it got closer, she could make out details that made her skin crawl. The ship looked alive somehow, with curved surfaces that seemed to pulse and move. Strange, organic-looking protrusions covered its hull, and it moved through space with an unsettling fluid motion. "My God," Dr. Carter whispered. "Look at those energy readings. Their technology is far beyond ours." Jake moved to Katie's side. "You need to get to the evacuation pods now." "But this is what we came here for," Katie protested. "This is first contact with an alien species. We can't just run away." "Katie, look at that ship," Jake said firmly. "Does it look friendly to you?" Before Katie could answer, the alien vessel opened fire. The station shook violently as weapons struck the outer hull. Emergency lights flickered and the artificial gravity fluctuated, making everyone stumble. "All hands abandon station," Captain Mitchell shouted into his communicator. "This is not a drill. All personnel to evacuation pods immediately." Jake grabbed Katie's arm. "Come on. We have to go now." They ran through corridors filled with panicking scientists and technicians. The alien ship continued its attack, and with each hit, the station shook more violently. Pieces of the ceiling began falling, and sparks flew from damaged electrical systems. Katie and Jake reached the evacuation pod bay just as another massive explosion rocked the station. The lights went out completely, leaving them in darkness, except for the emergency lighting strips along the floor. "Pod 7 is over here," Jake called out, using his flashlight to guide them through the smoke and debris. They were almost there when Katie heard something that made her blood freeze. It was a sound like metal being cut, but wrong somehow. wet and organic. Then she heard footsteps, but they didn't sound human. They were too heavy, with a strange clicking rhythm. "Jake," she whispered, grabbing his arm. He stopped and listened. The footsteps were getting closer, along with other sounds, harsh breathing and what sounded like electronic communication in a language unlike anything Katie had ever heard. "They're boarding the station," Jake whispered. He pulled out his weapon and pushed Katie behind him. "Get to the pod, I'll hold them off." "I'm not leaving you," Katie said stubbornly. "Katie, listen to me," Jake said urgently. "Someone needs to survive this. Someone needs to tell Earth what happened here. It has to be you." Before Katie could argue, 3 figures emerged from the smoke. Katie's breath caught in her throat. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with bodies that looked like a nightmare, combination of insect and machine. Their skin was dark and chitinous but covered with metallic implants that pulsed with blue light. Multiple arms extended from their torsos, some ending in hands with too many fingers, others in mechanical tools or weapons. Their heads were elongated, with large, multifaceted eyes that reflected the emergency lights like mirrors. Jake opened fire immediately, but his bullets seemed to have little effect on the aliens' armor. They moved with impossible speed, covering the distance between them in seconds. "Run, Katie!" Jake shouted as he tried to reload his weapon. Katie hesitated for 1 fatal second. She wanted to help Jake, but she knew she couldn't fight these creatures. In that moment of hesitation, one of the aliens noticed her. Its head turned toward her with mechanical precision, and she saw intelligence in those alien eyes. Cold, calculating intelligence. The creature made a sound like static electricity mixed with clicking insects. The other 2 aliens immediately stopped attacking Jake and focused on Katie instead. "No!" Jake screamed, throwing himself between Katie and the aliens. The largest alien backhanded Jake almost casually, sending him flying into the wall with a sickening crack. He slumped to the floor and didn't move. Katie tried to run, but the aliens were too fast. 2 of them grabbed her with their mechanical hands, their grip surprisingly gentle but completely unbreakable. She struggled and screamed, but they ignored her completely. The 3rd alien pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a weapon. It pointed the device at Katie, and beams of blue light played across her body. The device made soft beeping sounds, and the aliens' eyes brightened. It spoke to the others in its clicking electronic language. Katie couldn't understand the words, but she could hear satisfaction in its voice. They had found what they were looking for. The aliens carried Katie toward the hole they had cut in the station's hull. She could see their ship beyond, its organic surfaces writhing like a living thing. Other aliens were moving through the station, but they weren't taking anyone else. They only wanted her. As they dragged her away, Katie saw Jake trying to get up, blood running down his face. Their eyes met for one brief moment. "I'll find you," he mouthed silently. Then Katie was through the hull breach and into the alien ship. The last thing she saw of human space was Horizon 7 growing smaller in the distance, pieces of the station drifting away like dying stars. The alien ship closed around her like a mouth, and everything went dark. 6 months had passed since the attack on Horizon 7. The human authorities had declared Katie Morgan dead, just another casualty of humanity's first contact with hostile alien life. Memorial services were held. Her name was added to the list of heroes who died exploring the unknown. Her parents grieved for a daughter they would never see again. But Katie was not dead. She woke up in a place that made no sense to her human mind. The walls around her seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in a slow, steady rhythm. What she had first thought was metal was actually some kind of living tissue, pale and translucent, with veins of blue light running through it like blood vessels. The floor beneath her feet was warm and slightly soft, as if she was standing inside a giant organism. Katie tried to remember how she had gotten here, but her memories were fuzzy. She remembered the alien ship, remembered being dragged through corridors that looked more like intestines than hallways. She remembered being placed in some kind of tank filled with liquid that made her feel sleepy. After that, everything was darkness. Now she was in this room that was alive. She was wearing clothes made of the same organic material as the walls, and she felt different somehow. Stronger, more aware. When she looked at her hands, she could see faint blue lines under her skin, like the veins of light in the walls around her. The door opened without a sound, flowing apart like water. One of the aliens entered, and Katie pressed herself against the far wall in terror. Up close, the creature was even more frightening than she remembered. Its insect-like head tilted as it studied her with those horrible, multifaceted eyes. It spoke, and to Katie's shock, she understood some of the words. The alien language that had sounded like random clicks and static before now had meaning. It was saying something about tests and compatibility and success. "You understand?" the alien said, switching to broken English. "Good. The integration proceeds as planned." "Integration?" Katie whispered. Her voice sounded strange, deeper than before. "You are no longer fully human," the alien explained. Its voice was emotionless, like a computer. "We have improved you, enhanced you. You are becoming something new." Katie looked down at her hands again. The blue lines were brighter now, and she could feel something moving under her skin. "What did you do to me?" "We gave you gifts," the alien said. "Gifts that your species lacks. Strength, speed, intelligence, the ability to interface with our technology. You should be grateful." "Grateful?" Katie's fear was turning to anger. "You kidnapped me. You killed my friends. And now you've done something to my body without my permission." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Permission is irrelevant. You were chosen because your genetic structure was compatible with our biomechanical systems. Most humans die during the integration process. You survived because you are special. Special how? Your brain is different, more adaptable. The neural pathways that allow creativity and problem-solving in humans are more developed in you than in most of your species. This made the fusion possible." Katie felt sick. She was some kind of experiment, a test subject for alien technology. "Why are you doing this to us? What do you want from humanity?" The alien was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried something Katie hadn't expected: fear. "We are the HFY," it said. "For 1,000 years we have fled across the galaxy. We take what we need from other species to survive. Your species has something we require." "What?" "Adaptability, resilience, the ability to survive in impossible circumstances. These traits are rare in the galaxy. Most species that achieve space travel become soft, dependent on their technology. They die easily when faced with true hardship. Humans are different." Katie was beginning to understand. "You're not conquerors. You're refugees." The alien's head tilted again. "You learn quickly. The integration has enhanced your cognitive abilities." Over the following weeks, Katie learned more about her situation. The HFY had brought her to their homeworld, a planet that was entirely artificial. Every surface was covered with the same living biotechnology that made up her prison. The cities were vast organisms that grew rather than being built. The HFY themselves were no longer entirely organic. They had merged with their technology so completely that it was impossible to tell where the living being ended and the machine began. Katie also learned that she was not the first human they had taken. There had been others, dozens of them, captured from ships and colonies across human space. But all the others had died during the integration process. Their brains couldn't handle the connection to HFY biotechnology. Katie was different. Not only had she survived, but she was thriving. The alien technology was rewriting her DNA, enhancing her body and mind in ways that should have been impossible. She could now lift objects that would have been too heavy for her before. Her reflexes were lightning fast. Most disturbing of all, she was beginning to access memories that weren't her own. Sometimes she would suddenly know things about HFY history and culture. She would understand their language perfectly, or know how to operate their biomechanical devices without being taught. It was as if the alien technology was downloading information directly into her brain. The worst part was that she could feel her human emotions and thoughts becoming mixed with alien ones. Sometimes she would catch herself thinking like a HFY, viewing other species as resources to be used. When this happened, she would force herself to remember her human life, her friends, her family. She clung to these memories like anchors, afraid that without them she would lose herself completely. Meanwhile, back in human space, Jake Sullivan was refusing to accept Katie's death. The explosion on Horizon 7 had left him with a severe head injury and broken ribs, but he had survived. While he recovered in the hospital, he spent every waking moment studying the data from the alien attack. The other survivors thought he was going crazy. The military had written a report about the incident and classified it. The scientific community was divided between those who wanted to prepare for another attack and those who thought the aliens had simply moved on to easier targets. But Jake had noticed something in the security footage that everyone else had missed. The aliens hadn't just attacked the station randomly. They had scanned everyone they encountered, but they had only taken Katie. They had come looking for something specific, and they had found it in her, Dr. Lisa Carter, who had also survived. The attack helped Jake analyze Katie's medical records. They discovered that Katie had a rare genetic mutation that affected her brain development. It was something that occurred in less than 1% of the human population, and it made her neural pathways more flexible than normal. It's like her brain is wired to adapt to new situations more easily than most people, Dr. Carter explained. If the aliens were looking for someone to experiment on, someone whose mind could handle integration with alien technology, Katie would be the perfect test subject. Jake felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. Katie was alive somewhere out there, and the aliens were doing something terrible to her. He began planning a rescue mission that everyone told him was impossible. On the HFY homeworld, Katie was beginning to understand the true scope of what was happening to her. The alien technology wasn't just changing her body, it was creating a bridge between human and HFY consciousness. Through this bridge, she was learning things that the HFY had never intended to share. She learned about the ancient enemy that had driven them from their original homeworld. She learned about the dozens of species they had conquered and absorbed in their desperate flight across the galaxy. And most importantly, she learned that they were planning to do the same thing to humanity. The HFY saw humans as the solution to their greatest problem. Human adaptability could be copied, reproduced, and used to create a hybrid army capable of fighting their ancient enemy. All they needed was to perfect the integration process, and Katie was the key to making that happen. But as the weeks passed, Katie realized that the integration was working both ways. While she was becoming more like them, they were also becoming more like her. Her human emotions and creativity were bleeding into their collective consciousness through the biotechnological link. Some of the HFY were beginning to question their methods to feel guilt about what they had done to other species. Katie sensed an opportunity in this weakness. If she could learn to control the connection, if she could find a way to influence the HFY collective consciousness, she might be able to turn their own technology against them. But first, she needed to survive the transformation without losing herself completely. And time was running out. 1 year after her capture, Katie Morgan stood in the biomechanical chamber that had become her prison and her laboratory. The blue veins under her skin now pulsed with their own light, and her eyes had developed flecks of silver that allowed her to see energy patterns invisible to normal humans. She was no longer entirely human, but she had discovered that this gave her power the HFY had never expected. The aliens believed they controlled the integration process, but Katie had learned to influence it from within. Through months of careful practice, she had gained access to deeper levels of the HFY collective consciousness. She could feel their thoughts, their memories, their fears, and what she found there changed everything. The HFY were terrified. For centuries, they had been running from an enemy they called the Devourers, ancient machines that consumed all organic life to fuel their endless expansion across the galaxy. The HFY homeworld had been beautiful once, green and alive like Earth. But the Devourers had found them, stripped their planet bare, and forced the survivors to flee into space. Every species the HFY had conquered since then had been absorbed into their collective, not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. They were trying to build an army strong enough to fight back against the machines that had destroyed their world. The problem was that every species they absorbed made them weaker, not stronger. The biomechanical integration process diluted their abilities rather than enhancing them. Humans were different. Katie's successful integration had shown them that human adaptability could actually improve HFY capabilities. This discovery had led to a terrible decision. They were planning a full-scale invasion of human space. They intended to capture millions of humans for integration, creating a hybrid army that could finally defeat the Devourers. Katie knew she had to stop them, but she was one person against an entire civilization. However, she had discovered something the HFY didn't know about their own technology. The biomechanical systems that controlled their ships and cities were all connected to the collective consciousness, and Katie, with her unique hybrid nature, could access those systems directly. She began her escape on a night when the artificial storms that swept across the HFY homeworld would mask her movements. Katie had spent weeks studying the layout of the bioship docking facility through the collective consciousness, learning which vessels were scheduled for long-range missions. Moving through the living corridors of the HFY city, Katie felt like a ghost. Her enhanced abilities allowed her to avoid the security sensors, and her connection to the collective consciousness told her where the guards would be patrolling. The hardest part was suppressing her human emotions, which threatened to trigger alarms in the biomechanical systems. The ship she chose was medium-sized, designed for reconnaissance missions. As she approached it, Katie placed her hands on its living hull and felt its consciousness stir in response to her touch. The vessel recognized her as part HFY and part something else, something it found fascinating. "Let me in," Katie whispered, pushing her thoughts into the ship's biomechanical brain. "I can show you things you've never seen." The ship's hull flowed open like water, creating an entrance just for her. Katie climbed inside and made her way to the control chamber, where she placed her hands on the pilot interface. Immediately, her mind merged with the ship's consciousness and she felt its confusion and curiosity about her hybrid nature. Flying the bioship was unlike anything Katie could have imagined. Instead of pressing buttons or moving controls, she thought her intentions directly into the vessel's mind. The ship responded to her desires as if it were an extension of her own body. Together, they lifted off from the HFY homeworld and headed toward human space. The journey took 3 weeks and it nearly killed both Katie and the ship. Bioships were designed to receive regular life support energy from HFY facilities, but Katie's hybrid nature allowed her to share some of her own life force with the vessel. It was a dangerous gamble that left both of them weakened and dying by the time they reached the outer human colonies. Katie's arrival at mining station Beta 7 caused immediate panic. The alien bioship appeared on their sensors like a nightmare from their worst fears, and the station's small defense force prepared to fight a hopeless battle. But instead of attacking, the ship sent a simple message in English: Katie Morgan requesting medical assistance. When the rescue team finally convinced their commanders to investigate, they found Katie unconscious in the control chamber of a dying alien vessel. She looked human at first glance, but closer examination revealed the dramatic changes the integration process had made to her body. Her skin had a faint, translucent quality that showed the blue energy networks underneath. Her muscles were denser and stronger than any humans should be. Most disturbing were the biomechanical interfaces visible at her temples and wrists, looking like metallic tattoos that pulsed with soft light. Jake Sullivan arrived at Beta 7 3 days later. He had spent the past year putting together a team of volunteers for an impossible rescue mission, using his own savings and help from Dr. Lisa Carter to fund their efforts. When he heard about Katie's return, he dropped everything and took the fastest ship he could find to reach her. The reunion was not what either of them had expected. Katie was awake and alert, but Jake could see immediately that she was different. Her movements were too precise, too controlled. Her eyes held knowledge that no human should possess, and sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she would stare into space with an expression that seemed utterly alien. "Katie?" Jake said softly as he entered her medical room. "Is it really you?" Katie turned to look at him, and for a moment her face showed pure human emotion. Joy, relief, love for a friend who had never stopped believing in her. But then the expression became guarded again. "I'm still me, Jake," she said. "But I'm also something else now, something that might be humanity's only hope." Over the following days, Katie told her story to a room full of military officers, scientists, and government officials. She described the Vex-High homeworld, their biomechanical technology, and their plans for human conquest. But the most shocking revelation was her description of the Devourers. "They're not just machines," Katie explained, her silver-flecked eyes reflecting the lights in the briefing room. "They're a civilization that gave up their biological forms millions of years ago. They believe that organic life is inefficient and chaotic. Their goal is to convert all organic matter in the galaxy into computational substrate for their collective consciousness." General Paul Hayes, who was leading the human defense planning, leaned forward in his chair. "How do we fight something like that?" "The Vex-High have been trying to answer that question for centuries," Katie replied. "Every time they think they've found a solution, the Devourers adapt. The machines learn from every encounter, becoming stronger and more efficient." Dr. Emma Rodriguez, a specialist in biomechanical systems, had been studying Katie's transformation with fascination and horror. "Katie, what you've become, this integration with alien technology, is it permanent?" Katie was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. The changes are still progressing. Sometimes I access memories that aren't mine from other species the Vex-High absorbed. I can feel their collective consciousness even from here, like a whisper in the back of my mind." "Is that why you came back?" Jake asked. "To warn us about the invasion?" "Partly," Katie admitted. "But also because I learned something the Vex-High don't know yet. The integration process is working both ways. While I'm becoming more like them, they're also becoming more like me. Some of them are starting to question their methods, to feel guilt about what they've done to other species." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "The Devourers are coming. The Vex-High's attempts to track me will lead them right to human space. We have maybe 6 months before they arrive. Then we need to prepare for war," General Hayes said. Grimly, Katie shook her head. "War isn't the answer. The Devourers want us to fight. Every battle makes them stronger because they learn from our tactics and technology. We need to find a different way." "What do you suggest?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. Katie turned back to face the room, and Jake saw something in her expression that was both human and alien, a determination that seemed to burn with its own inner light. "We need to unite with the Vex-High," she said. "Form an alliance against our common enemy. And I think I know how to convince them." The room erupted in protests and arguments, but Katie remained calm. She had seen the future through the collective consciousness, glimpsed the coming of the Devourers like a tide of metal and death sweeping across the galaxy. Humanity's survival depended on making an alliance with the very aliens who had planned to enslave them. And Katie Morgan, no longer fully human but not yet fully alien, was the only one who could make it happen. 18 months after Katie's capture, the impossible had become reality. Human ships flew alongside Vex-High biovessels in the largest combined fleet the galaxy had ever seen. The alliance had taken 6 months to arrange, with Katie serving as translator and diplomat between two species that had every reason to hate each other. The negotiations had been difficult. Many humans wanted revenge for the attacks on their colonies. Many Vex-High saw humans as primitive creatures unworthy of partnership. But Katie's unique position as a bridge between both species had made communication possible, and the approaching threat of the Devourers had made cooperation necessary. Katie stood in the command center of the hybrid vessel New Dawn, a ship that represented everything the Alliance had achieved. Part of it was built with human engineering, clean metal surfaces, efficient designs, and weapons that fired solid projectiles and energy beams. The other part was grown using Vex-High biotechnology, living walls that could repair themselves, organic computers that thought rather than calculated, and weapons that adapted to their targets. "Contact on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant Commander Nick Barnes, the human officer monitoring the detection systems. Multiple vessels, estimated count over 5,000. Katie closed her eyes and reached out with her enhanced senses, feeling through the biomechanical networks that connected all the ships in the fleet. Through the collective consciousness she shared with the Vex-High, she could sense the approaching enemy like a cold wind. "It's them," she said quietly. "The Devourers have found us." Admiral Chen Liu, the supreme commander of the human defense forces, turned to face her. "How long do we have?" 6 hours until they reach the edge of the solar system," Katie replied. 12 hours until they reach Earth. The plan they had developed was unlike any military strategy in human history. Traditional tactics would be useless against the Devourers, who learned from every battle and adapted their technology in real time. Instead, Katie had proposed something that required perfect coordination between human creativity and Vex-High biotechnology. The human ships would provide rapid, unpredictable attacks designed to confuse the enemy sensors. The Vex-High biovessels would focus on disrupting the Devourers' collective network, using their own biomechanical technology to introduce chaos into the machine consciousness. And Katie, linked to both fleets through her hybrid nature, would coordinate the attacks in ways that no computer could predict or counter. "All ships, prepare for engagement," Admiral Liu commanded. "Remember, our goal is not to destroy them. Our goal is to survive long enough for Katie's plan to work." The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a metal plague. Their ships were geometric and perfect, constructed from the converted matter of countless worlds they had consumed. Each vessel was identical to every other, part of a collective consciousness that spanned thousands of individual units, but thought as one. Katie felt their alien presence pressing against her mind like ice. The Devourers saw organic life as a mistake, a chaotic accident that needed to be corrected. They had no emotions, no individual thoughts, no concept of creativity or hope. They were perfection without soul, efficiency without purpose. "Incoming transmission," Nick Barnes reported. "It's from the Devourer fleet." "Put it through," Admiral Liu ordered. The voice that came through the communication system was perfectly modulated, without any trace of emotion. "Organic entities, you have allied with the Vex-High refugees. This alliance is irrelevant. Surrender now and your conversion to optimal form will be swift. Resistance will result in unnecessary suffering." Katie stepped forward and activated the transmission system. "This is Katie Morgan, speaking for the Allied fleet. We reject your offer. Life is not a mistake to be corrected, it's a gift to be protected. You are the hybrid," the Devourer voice replied, and for the first time it showed something like interest. "You represent an interesting combination of organic and technological elements. We will study you before your conversion." "You'll have to catch me first," Katie said, and closed the channel. The battle began moments later. The Devourer ships moved with mechanical precision, their formations perfect and their targeting flawless. But the Allied fleet responded with something the machines had never encountered before: organized chaos. Human ships darted between the enemy vessels like angry wasps, firing bursts of energy and projectiles before disappearing behind asteroids and debris. Their attacks seemed random and ineffective, but they were actually following patterns that Katie transmitted directly into the pilots' minds through her connection to both fleets. Meanwhile, the Vex-High bioships engaged in a different kind of warfare. They extended tendrils of biomechanical energy toward the Devourer vessels, trying to make contact with the machine's collective consciousness. When they succeeded, they introduced fragments of organic thought, emotions, memories, contradictions, into the perfect digital minds. Katie was the center of it all. Her consciousness spread across hundreds of ships simultaneously. She could feel every human pilot's fear and determination, every Vex-High warrior's desperate hope. She could also sense the growing confusion in the Devourer collective as they tried to process the chaotic patterns of the Allied attack. "Phase 2, Katie announced across all channels. "Begin the convergence." This was the most dangerous part of the plan. Katie began merging her consciousness more deeply with both the human and Vex-High networks, creating a three-way connection that had never existed before. The process was incredibly painful, like having her mind torn apart and rebuilt every few seconds, but it allowed her to coordinate the fleet with unprecedented precision. The Allied ships began moving in patterns that defied military logic but followed deeper rhythms, the beating of hearts, the flow of rivers, the growth of trees. These organic patterns were impossible for the Devourers to predict or counter because they weren't based on calculation, but on the fundamental chaos of life itself. But the strain was killing Katie. She could feel her hybrid physiology breaking, down under the pressure of maintaining connections to so many minds at once. Blood ran from her nose and ears as her brain struggled to process information from thousands of sources. "Katie, you need to stop," Jake Sullivan said from his position at the tactical station. "The medical scanners show you're dying." "Not yet," Katie gasped. "I can feel them weakening. The organic patterns are disrupting their collective consciousness. They're starting to make mistakes." She was right. For the first time in millions of years, the Devourer fleet was showing signs of confusion. Some ships were firing on their own allies. Others were breaking formation and flying in random directions. The perfect collective consciousness was fracturing under the assault of chaotic organic thought. "Now!" Katie screamed across all channels. "All ships, full assault on the command vessel." The entire Allied fleet converged on the largest Devourer ship, the one that served as the central processing node for their collective consciousness. Human weapons and Vex-High bioenergy struck the vessel simultaneously, but it was Katie's final act that sealed their victory. She gathered all her remaining strength and pushed her consciousness directly into the Devourer command ship's computer core. The collision between organic chaos and digital perfection created a feedback loop that spread throughout the enemy fleet. One by one, the Devourer ships began shutting down as their collective consciousness collapsed under the weight of contradictory information. The last thing Katie saw before her consciousness scattered was the enemy fleet drifting powerless in space, their perfect formation broken by the beautiful chaos of life. She woke up 3 days later in a medical bay that combined human and Vex-High technology. Dr. Sam Parker, her personal physician, was monitoring biomechanical readouts that showed her hybrid physiology slowly stabilizing. "Welcome back," Jake said from a chair beside her bed. "You've been unconscious for 72 hours. We weren't sure you were going to make it." "Did we win?" Katie asked weakly. "The Devourer fleet is completely disabled," Jake replied. "Some of the ships are being studied by joint human Vex-High research teams. Others are being converted into habitats for Vex-High refugees who want to settle in human space." Katie smiled despite her exhaustion. "And the Alliance?" "Stronger than ever. President Diana Walsh and the Vex-High Council have signed a formal treaty. They're calling it the Morgan Accords in your honor." As Katie recovered over the following weeks, she learned about the changes her sacrifice had brought to the galaxy. The defeat of the Devourers had freed dozens of enslaved species who began forming their own alliances with humans and Vex-High. The biomechanical technology that had been used to control and dominate was being reimagined as a tool for healing and growth. Most importantly, Katie discovered that her consciousness had not been destroyed by the effort to defeat the Devourers. Instead, it had been distributed throughout the biomechanical networks of both species, creating a permanent bridge between human and Vex-High thought. She could still access the collective consciousness when needed, but she remained fundamentally herself. Jake found her one evening on the observation deck of the space station where she was continuing her recovery. She was looking out at the stars, watching human and Vex-High ships working together to build new colonies and research stations. "Any regrets?" he asked, standing beside her. Katie considered the question carefully. She was no longer entirely human, but she had helped save not just humanity but all organic life in the galaxy. The girl who had dreamed of meeting aliens among the stars had become something that could unite species across the cosmos. "No regrets," she said finally. "This is what I always wanted, to be part of something bigger than myself, something that connects all life in the universe." As they watched, a new bioship launched from the station, its living hull gleaming in the starlight. It was carrying the first joint human Vex-High crew to explore the galaxy beyond, seeking out other species that might need protection from threats like the Devourers. Katie Morgan had started as a curious young woman who dreamed of finding aliens among the stars. She had become something new, a bridge between species, a guardian of organic life, and proof that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from conquest, but from the courage to reach across the darkness and offer friendship to those who need it most.